Hi there, how are you doing? My name is Angel, and I like all things that are mysterious. So, we're here for another Christmas horror story group, right? I got some doozies for you. I'm going to try to knock out this book because I found a new book, and I really want to get into that. So, we're going to go hard. Less talk from me, right? Let's get into it. This one's called, oh, before we actually get into it, these are stories they're left from the 50 Christmas scary stories. Hold on. Crud. I want to say his name's John White. I swear it's John White. I'll put it in here when I'm doing editing, just in case I'm wrong. But I feel like it's John White. Anyways, this story is called Come Play With Me. North Carolina, October 31st, 1982. Alice Anderson, 6 years old, awoke and sat up in bed. She climbed out of bed after pulling the blankets aside. She picked out a dress and put it on. That day didn't feel strange in the least. That day didn't feel strange in the least. Why would it do that? She didn't feel terrified. She didn't feel uneasy. The day was just like any other. Alice enjoyed Halloween because she was able to choose a costume and dress up. She liked carving pumpkins and she enjoyed every aspect of the event. Alice, at the age of 6, had no idea what the day would bring. She had no idea that would be her last day seeing or being with her mother. The evening arrived, and Alice dressed in her costume with the help of her mother, Abigail, after waiting all day. This year she dressed up as Red Riding Hood. Abigail began brushing Alice's hair after the costume was on. Her long, luscious black hair cascaded over the back of her neck. Abigail continued combing her daughter's hair, admiring her. Alice was a lovely little girl with blue eyes that reminded Abigail of her mother. Abigail was a huge fan of Alice. Abigail was taking Alice trick-or-treating, and Alice was giddy with anticipation. "Mommy, are you ready?" Alice asked as she collected her trick-or-treat bag. Alice inquired, "Yeah, honey," Abigail said as she reached for her purse. She responded, "Come on," she says. Abigail and Alice strolled down the sidewalk after exiting the front door. They visited a few homes. Alice's bag was half full by the time they were finished. Abigail was about to ask Alice if she was ready to go home when they were approached by a young girl. She appeared to be around Alice's age, if not a little older. The complexion of the small child was as white as a ghost. She had dark brown hair and large brown eyes. Abigail became aware that she was not dressed for Halloween. She was dressed in a long black sleeveless dress, towering black boots, and a black choker necklace. She had lifeless eyes when she looked at them. "Hello?" Abigail inquired, a worried smile on her face. "Hi," with a pout on her face, the girl said. "Can you tell me your name?" Abigail inquired. "Amy," she responded. She was staring at me with a blank expression on her face. "Amy, how old are you?" Abigail inquired. Amy said, "I'm 9 years old." "Is there anyone else out here with you?" Abigail inquired. "No," she replied. Abigail declared, "A youngster your age shouldn't be out alone." "I live with my grandmother over there in those trees," Amy replied, pointing. Amy pointed to the woods, and Abigail looked over. She felt a shiver run down her spine. Abigail turned away from the woods and returned her gaze to Amy. Amy smiled as she looked up at Abigail. Abigail gave Amy a brief glance before averting her gaze. Amy's smile wasn't lovely, it was eerie and frightening. Abigail compared it to a psychopath. Her eyes had turned into black pools and were staring up at Abigail. You should come to my grandma's house. She has loads of candy, Amy finally responded. Oh, I'm not so sure, Abigail replied. It's the greatest candy, Amy went on. Abigail really desired to return home so that she and Alice could be free of Amy, who was such a frightening little child. Please, Mommy, let us go, Alice pleaded for help. I don't believe so, Abigail replied. Please, 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 Mamma, Alice begged once more. Abigail felt awful because Alice was looking up at her with those large blue eyes. I suppose we may take a break, but then it's time for us to return home, Abigail responded. All right, Alice said, a broad smile on her face. Abigail took Alice's hand in hers and began walking towards the woods with Amy. Abigail was covered in goosebumps and got a horrible sensation when they entered the woods. The trees were lifeless and as dark as coal. The branches were long and delicate, with thin tips that appeared to be fingers reaching down to catch them. The ground was littered with decaying leaves, which crunched loudly under their feet as they moved. The moon was their only source of illumination. The strong moonlight illuminated the landscape surrounding them, giving it a sinister appearance. As they followed Amy, Abigail's hold on Alice's hand tightened. A crow swooped down on Abigail and Alice, and they dove to avoid being pecked or scratched. Abigail looked around as they stood up, but couldn't find Amy. What happened to her? Abigail inquired loudly. Amy! Abigail yelled as she looked around. Amy! She screamed once more. When Abigail heard laughter, she was about to cry out her name again. The sound of malevolent laughter reverberated throughout the jungle. Amy! Are you the one? Abigail yelled. She was trembling with terror, but she was attempting to be brave for the sake of her kid. Mommy, I'm terrified, Alice whispered, clutching her mother's arm tightly. It'll be fine, honey, Abigail assured. Amy whispered, Abigail, in a hushed tone. Hello? Abigail raised her voice. She paused for a bit, but received no response. Who's there? Abigail yelled. Abigail, come find me, Amy said. Her voice boomed over the jungle once more. Amy, come out immediately, Abigail yelled. Amy didn't say anything and didn't come out. Come out, or we'll have to leave, Abigail went on. Nothing except quiet could be heard. Then Abigail felt a touch on the back of her neck. She swung around fast, expecting to see Amy, but there was no one there. Amy gawked. Come play with me. Mommy, I want to go home, Alice sobbed, her eyes welling up with tears. It's okay, honey, Abigail said. We'll get home. Abigail searched around for a route out, but couldn't see one. Abigail said softly, Come on, honey. They began to go forward while Abigail continued to gaze around. She began to notice toys on the ground as she progressed deeper into the woods. Toy trucks, railroads, dolls, an old jump rope, and a large red ball were among the toys. A rusted old swing set was hidden behind some trees. Abigail was perplexed as to what had occurred. Can we please go home, Mommy? Alice said again. Abigail said, Honey, I'm working on it. Alice tightened her grip on her mother's hand. Her little heart began to beat as quickly as a hummingbird's wings. As they strolled past all the lifeless toys, they heard the giggling once more. It wasn't just Amy this time. There were several children involved. Abigail came to a complete halt and stared straight ahead. She was terrified and perplexed by what she witnessed. A dilapidated two-story farmhouse stood in front of her. Abigail and her daughter stood motionless in front of the house, unsure of what to do. It was a spooky black wooden structure. What made it so dark? Abigail was astounded by the size of the entrance door. The picture windows were completely covered with black shutters. The massive black chimney loomed over them. The house's appearance gave Abigail shivers. Amy abruptly yelled, "Follow me!" as she walked out from behind a tree. Abigail looked around enraged. "What kind of ruse are you pulling on me?" she inquired. "Are you terrified, Abigail?" Amy said, laughing. "How did you get my name? I never mentioned it to you," Abigail inquired. Amy didn't respond. Instead, she laughed as she climbed up the creaky wooden stairwell. "Come on," Amy encouraged. Abigail and Alice took their time, ascending the stairwell. Amy pushed open the door. As Amy pushed open the door, it creaked loudly, and the inside of the house was pitch black. Abigail and Alice stood on the front porch, watching Amy enter the house and vanish into the darkness. Abigail and Alice entered the house gently. The door banged shut behind them as they cleared it. I wouldn't have went in the house anyways. Abigail recognized she had made a mistake by following Amy into the house. "Amy," they said when they couldn't see anything. Abigail raised her voice. They suddenly heard giggling again. Then they heard someone upstairs wandering around. "Mommy, I'm extremely worried," Alice admitted quietly. "It's all right, sweetheart," Abigail replied. The giggling came to a halt for a little period. "Alice, come play with me," Amy asked abruptly. "Mommy, I want to go home," Alice expressed her desire. "Shh," Abigail said quietly. "Alice," Amy murmured again, her voice eerie. Then there was a complete quiet, and Abigail's face was covered in fear. She was relieved that Alice was unable to see her face. When they heard someone running down the stairs, Abigail was going to cry out Amy's name. "Get out of my house!" a man yelled. Because of the darkness in the house, they couldn't see the man. When the door first shut, they hadn't even moved from where they were standing. Abigail was ready to pick up Alice, but something or someone grabbed her leg and carried her into the darkness before she could. "Mommy," she let out a cry. "Alice, give my daughter back," Abigail yelled. She screamed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Alice screamed and cried, and Abigail heard everything. "Get out!" yelled the crowd. Abigail felt a shiver run down her spine as she heard something whispered in her ear. Abigail stood in the darkness, helpless. It was impossible to move because there was insufficient light. Abigail was startled to feel someone's hand slide around her neck. At the same time, she heard giggling. Amy murmured, "Come play with me, Abigail." Because she couldn't speak, Abigail remained silent. The person's grasp tightened, making breathing difficult. As she fought to flee, her heart was racing. She heard a blood-curdling scream out of nowhere. Abigail was aware that it was belonged to a woman, but she had no idea where it had originated from. Abigail was sure her heart had stopped for a moment, since every hair on her body was standing up. The screams came to a halt, and the room fell silent. She was terrified because the hand still around her neck. Was this the final chapter? She was about to scream when she felt something hard strike the back of her head, and everything went black. Abigail gradually opened her eyes, and the first thing she saw was that she was suffering from a severe headache. She was outside, near the trees, laying on the ground. She has no recollection of the previous night's events. She sat up carefully in the grass and took a look around. She was carrying a large bag of chocolates in her purse. She was curious as to who owned the chocolates. On the bag, she noticed the name Alice. Abigail was perplexed. She had never met somebody named Alice. She had no children. She had never had children. Abigail got up, grabbed her purse, and began heading back to her apartment. She dropped the candy bag on the ground. She was strolling down the street when she became aware of being followed. She kept checking behind her, but there was no one there. She was walking when she heard her name called out. "Hello?" Abigail asked as she looked around. She screamed, "Come play with me, Abigail." The voice said something. "Who's there?" Abigail inquired. It started to rain as she continued walking down the road. "Who is there?" Abigail asked as she turned around to hear chuckling. She inquired one more. The voice repeated again, "Come play with me, Abigail." "Leave me alone!" exclaims the narrator. Abigail yelled. Abigail slipped over a pebble and landed on the cold, damp pavement, her head smacking the ground. Her eyesight was fuzzy as she cautiously lifted her head. She noticed those approaching her through the haze of her vision. Abigail could see the person better as they came closer. Amy took a seat on the sidewalk and began massaging Abigail's hair. "Can you tell me who you are?" Abigail inquired. Amy grinned her psychopath smile, which was menacing and bone-chilling. "It's all right, Abigail," Amy assured her. She took a break from caressing Abigail's head. "We're going to have a game," she went on. She then had a boulder lodged in her skull, and before Abigail could respond, Amy smacked her across the face. The world has returned to its previous state of darkness. Abigail awoke with a headache that was more worse than before. I don't know about you guys, but I'm 100% lost in this fucking story already. And I don't even think we're halfway through the story. I'm fucking lost in this story. One minute she has a kid, the next minute she doesn't. She keeps getting knocked out. A lot of this shit doesn't make sense. It's like they just wrote a bunch of different stories and pieced this all together. I don't know. I'm not really understanding what the hell's going on. Let's finish this story and then we're probably going to call it one because we're already at 20 minutes with this one story that don't make sense. Maybe it'll make sense at the end. Maybe, right? I don't know. All right. Abigail awoke with a headache that was more worse than before. She had no idea where she was and couldn't see anything because it was completely dark. Abigail felt her way around and realized she was in a tight place. Abigail began to scream. She shouted till her throat was raw and her voice was scratchy. She began slamming her fists on the walls, but it was in vain. No one arrived. She took a deep breath and began feeling her way around the dimly lit room. It had a rough, wood-like feel about it. Then it smacked her in the face like a ton of bricks. Her complexion darkened. She was in a casket. She knew where she was. Who in their right mind would bury her alive? She began shouting and kicking the coffin's walls. As she realized this was it, tears flowed down her face. She was suddenly distracted by humming, which drowned out her sobbing. "Hello," Abigail screamed as she slammed her fists against the top. She felt it odd that she could hear humming, but no one else could. "Please assist me," Abigail yelled. For several minutes the humming stopped, and there was silence. "Hello," Abigail screamed once more. A shiver ran down Abigail's spine. She became frightened all of a sudden. She then had a strong pain in her chest. She felt as if she had been stabbed since she couldn't catch her breath. This story don't make not a fucking lick of sense. Now she's in a fucking casket. I swear to God, they wrote several different fucking stories for this story, and then just pieced them together to make it longer because this shit don't make no sense. No sense. Anyways, I'm having a hell of a time reading the story because it just doesn't make sense. Let's get through it. She then had a strong pain in her chest. She felt as if she had been stabbed since she couldn't catch her breath. She carefully stroked the sore spot, which felt damp and cold. Abigail had a feeling it was blood. She heard giggling again and raised her eyes to the coffin's top. She smiled when she spotted Amy's head. Amy began, "You know, Abigail, you shouldn't go into the woods after a dead female." Abigail remained silent, unable to do anything but gulp for oxygen, with a horrified expression on her face. "Halloween!" Amy exclaimed, giggling. Abigail then observed Amy's knife in her hand. Amy vanished, and Abigail attempted to scream, but no one heard her, and no one was ever able to locate her. Abigail and Alice Anderson were completely unknown. It was as if they didn't exist at all. Every year on Halloween, it is reported that you can hear individuals screaming while strolling through the woods. 31st of October 2002, North Carolina, is a state in the United States. Hannah Nelson, 10, was out trick-or-treating when she was approached by a young girl. "My name is Amy, and I'd like to introduce myself," she stated her case. Hannah replied, "Hello, my name is Hannah." "Come play with me, Hannah," Amy offered with a smile and a hand outstretched. Hannah grabbed Amy's hand and led her towards the woods. Hannah Nelson vanished without a trace. And that is the end of that story, guys. Oh my god. I don't know. So it's just a. But how the hell did that woman go from having a daughter? Her and her daughter walked into the woods. And then she got knocked out, and then she didn't have a daughter no more. And was carrying her daughter's bag still, though. I'm pretty fucking lost. If you guys understand what the hell's going on, leave it down in the comments. Explain it to me because I don't understand. So the woods gives you amnesia and then like the ghost children come after them? What is it? I don't understand. I don't understand. Anyways, it went over my head. It's not hard to go over my head though. I'm only 5 foot, so there's that. Anyways, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you would like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. And as always, I appreciate you and I hope you have a good day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.